Hey everyone, this is Chappie here at Intense, and for today's video, we're going to be unboxing the all-new Tazer Alloy. Alright, so now that we have the box open, let's grab the first few items out of here. So, first things first, we're going to pull up our wheel stabilizer here. We're going to grab our accessory bag out. We'll set this aside. And then next, on the other side of the box, we'll have this wheel stabilizer, which will contain our toolkit. So this is what we'll use to assemble the bike. All right, so once we're at this stage, before we pull the bike all the way out of the box, let's prep it so we can place it in the stand. So over here on the left-hand side of the handlebar, we'll unbox and unbag. This will expose our dropper post lever here. So simply just depress the lever, which will elevate the seat. Once the seat's all the way up, we have something good to put into the bike stand to continue on with our assembly. All right, so now that we're at this point, the first thing we want to do before we continue on is, well, get the bike on its way to being charged. So right here on the top of the motor here, you'll find this little flap. We'll pull this forward and that'll expose our charge port. And then from there, we can plug the bike directly in and begin charging. All right, so now that we have the bike at this stage, what we're going to be doing first is installing our rear derailleur. So we're going to take our 3-way that is located inside of our toolbox. We're going to take the 5mm, line it up on the main bolt of our rear derailleur. Line this bolt up to the threads of our derailleur hanger, taking note of our tab and making sure that goes above our hanger. And then go ahead and get the thread started carefully. Just 1 to 2 turns is all we need at this point, like so. And then we'll come back over to the far side of the derailleur here. So we'll confirm the tab of our B plate is above the flat surface of our derailleur hanger here. We can check this by just making sure the derailleur clocks forward and rest those two surfaces together. Once we have confirmed that, we can go ahead and turn our main pivot bolt all the way in. We'll just go to snug, and we'll come back with our torque wrench set to 10 to 12 Newton meters. All right, so now coming to the front of the bike, the first step here is we're going to get our stem positioned properly. So we're going to rotate this forward the same direction as the arch of our fork. And then from here, we're going to remove the stem faceplate and get our bars installed. All right, so with the bars in hand, let's take note of a couple items here. So first, we want to make sure all the protection is removed off the clamping surface. And then also, we want to make sure that our mode selector wire that comes from the left-hand side of the bar over to our display, we want to make sure that is down and out of the way of our clamping surface. And from there, we will roll our stem up into place, ensuring that things are lined up, and we can use the lines on the actual bar itself to help guide us in both lateral and rotation here. So we get that lined up. We'll take one of our stem faceplates, and then we want to take note of the print on the side here. With the Pro model, it is spec'd with the E13 stem, and it requires that the top maintains a 0 gap. So we'll start with the top bolt, we'll get that threaded in, and then we will explain a little bit more what that 0 gap is. All right, so with the 2 stem faceplates here installed, and then just the bolts started by hand, we'll take our wrench here, engage the bolt, and get these both threaded in. Just snug, we don't need to get crazy at this point. And why we go snug here on the top bolts first is because we want to make sure there's 0 gap between the stem faceplate here and then the stem body itself. So this ensures that we're able to do that. So once we know that those are together, we can use this opportunity here to get our bar centered up. And then we will come back with a torque wrench set to 5 to 7 Newton meters. Here I have it set to 6. We'll get those 2 bolts torqued into position. Get those wound in. Just give our handlebars one more check to make sure everything's centered and aligned. And once we are good with where we are positioned, we will torque these down to 5 to 7 Newton meters as I have here at 6. All right, so now that we have our handlebars positioned where they belong, let's get our display cable set up. So we're gonna roll our display down, which is gonna give a little bit better access to our ports here. We're gonna take our display cable that runs from our motor, which will also connect to the display and allow everything to communicate appropriately. We're gonna grab our wire here and we're gonna slide it into the backside of our tool that's included in our accessory bag. We're gonna align the cable end into the port of the display. And we're gonna slightly press, and then we're gonna give a firm press here, and we're gonna also listen for the audible click. Once we hear that click, we know the cable has been installed and it's ready to go. All right, so with our display set up and our electronics dialed in, the next step here is moving to installing our wheels. So we'll start at the front here with our front wheel, and then we'll move to the back after. So first step here, and we want to make sure this is clear, is that when we take our rotor protectors off the packaging, that we make sure we get our hub adapters off of the packaging. There is a warning and a caution sticker to remind you, but always make sure that all the hardware remains on the bike and not on your packaging. So we'll flip that wheel over. We'll do the same thing over here. It also came off. So we'll grab our hub adapter off of the packaging, pop that back into place. It's simply held in by an O-ring, so it'll slide right back in. All right, so our wheel is ready to install. Now let's get the bike ready. So we'll just simply remove the quick release axle here on the front. Take the protection off the end. It's just packaging, we'll get rid of that. Once we remove our axle, the last step here is to make sure that we remove our pad spacer. Okay. So next, we'll slide our front wheel into the fork legs. We'll use our knee as a support here. We'll align the rotor into the caliper first, and then align the ends of the hub into the dropouts of the fork. Once everything's lined up, slide in nice and easy. We'll take our axle, slide it in through the drive side. Once it's slid in, we'll make sure this lever's flipped out. Usually with the palm of my hand, I'll just rotate this in, applying a little bit of inward pressure and also turning in. And once we're almost all the way tight, usually it's about a half a turn, we will rotate our lever up. It's important to note that we never want the lever facing forward or down. We always want it either back, or how we set ours up, facing up. All right, so much like the front wheel, we have to take the packaging off of the rear wheel as well. It's the same exact things to note here. We want to make sure the hub end caps come off of the disc guard and back on our wheel. They just slide right back on, as well as the one on the cassette side. All right, so now that we have the wheel prepped, let's get the frame prepped. We'll start by removing our rear axle, slide this out the non-drive side of the bike. Then the next thing we're going to do is remove our pad spacer. And then lastly, now this is specific to the Pro model that's spec'd with our TRP drivetrain. On the Expert model, it has Shimano. It doesn't have this feature, but this is pretty handy. So down here on the cage of our rear derailleur, we have this tab. And on the TRP, we're just going to simply slide this tab out, like so. Once that tab is slid out, you can just simply roll the lower cage of our derailleur cage down. And that's going to make it much easier for us to install our rear wheel. So with that set up, we're going to bring our rear wheel up into the rear of our bike. We're going to pull our rear derailleur back, align the chain up on the smallest gear of the cassette, and continue to roll the wheel up into the opening. Align the dropouts, align the rotor. Once everything's aligned, slide right up. Then we'll insert our rear axle, get those threads started by hand, come back with our 3-way and our 5mm, get that spun in. From there, we will snug into place, and we'll come back with our torque wrench set to 11 Newton meters. Now the last step of the wheel installation, which is specific to the Pro model using the TRP rear derailleur, we're going to take the cage lever here, we're going to grab it with our thumb, roll it forward, once you hear that snap, we know that the lower cage is now keyed in with the derailleur. We can let that lower cage roll up. And then that's good. Last step here is we're going to engage the haul lock, which just simply helps to keep the derailleur more secure and also a lot quieter. All right, so now that we have the rear wheel installed and all the drivetrain intact, the next step here before we get the bike on the ground is we want to kind of just double check to make sure the drivetrain's functioning properly. Just simply go through the gears real quick, make sure everything's shifting smooth, consistent, precise, no lags. At this point, this system's working really, really good. But if you are experiencing any type of issues at this stage, we do have a derailleur tuning video specifically geared on how to reset and fully dial in your rear derailleur. So I highly encourage you to take a look at that in our other tech videos. But here, we're good to go, so we can move on to the next step. All right, so before we get the bike on the ground, we'll take this opportunity to throw on our water bottle cage. So this water bottle cage can go either way as far as left or right, but we'll just start this by just breaking our bolts free. Here's our water bottle cage. This is unidirectional as mentioned before. So we can just, before we put it on, we can flip this cage around if you're left-handed or right-handed, or prefer to pull your water bottle out from either side. So for this case, we're going to go this way. I'm going to line our water bottle cage to our water bottle mount on the frame. Get those threads started. Once we have both of those bolts snugged up, we'll come back with our 3mm Allen extension with our torque wrench set to 3 Newton meters and get these torqued up. All right, so now that we have the bike on the ground, the next step here is to finalize adjustment and torque our headset assembly. So first step here is we want to make sure that our handlebars are aligned with our front wheel. I typically use the front plane of our handlebars off of the fork. Gentle touches there, make sure we're good and aligned. Then from there, we're going to set the torque value of our headset cap, which sets the headset preload. So this is pretty important. There's no specific torque value associated with this, but we find anywhere between 2 and 4 Newton meters. Kind of gets you where you need to be. So for this case, we're going to run at 3 Newton meters. So it'll come with our 4mm Allen attached to our torque wrench set to 3 Newton meters. I'll engage that headset cap bolt. Just make sure we're torqued. All right, so now that we have our headset assembly torqued properly, our handlebars aligned where we want them, we can now go to do our stem pinch bolts for our steer tube. So we're going to use, on this particular bike, it's going to utilize a T25, and this stem requires 5 to 7 Newton meters of torque. So we will follow that up. All right, so now that we have our bars and stem and headset assembly all set up and dialed in, the next step here is to set up our saddle height. So one of the quickest ways to do this, at least to get it in the ballpark, is to just simply put your hand on the top of your hip bone and then line it up with the seat. So you can see here that the seat's a little bit high for me, so we'll make that adjustment and then recheck. So this, we're just going to use a 4mm Allen. We don't need to go too much here. Just go about 3/4 of a turn, half a turn to 3/4 of a turn. That will loosen the seat post. For me, we're going to slide the seat post down into the low position here. We're going to slide our torque wrench back to tighten, and we're going to tighten and torque. So this seat and seat post clamp assembly requires 6 Newton meters. So just tighten and torque as such. Come back, follow the same process. Got the hand on top of the hip bone. We just want it to go just over the top of the saddle here. So as you can see, this is actually set up pretty good. Now this is just a starting point. It can change, and I would definitely suggest you to change as you ride. You find what's most comfortable for you. At the end of the day, that's what's important. All right, so now that we have our cockpit set up and everything's good in that department, the next thing we want to do is set up our sag and then talk a little bit about tire pressure. So in regards to sag, we do have a detailed video on walking you through the step-by-step process for this for the rear as well as the front. I highly suggest going through that, making sure that the suspension is set for you. We do also have air pressure charts in the user manual for this bike that will also give you pretty good starting points for each one of those. And then now let's talk a little bit about tire pressures. On this particular bike, we are running the 279, so we have the 29 up front and then the 27.5 plus in the rear. They use a little bit different tire pressures than each other, what you would find typical on a normal mountain bike. So on the 29 up front, you would run anywhere from 26 to 29 PSI, give or take 5 plus or minus 5 depending on riding conditions, rider weight. The rear, you're gonna be about 26 to 28. And that does definitely vary depending on rider weight and riding conditions. All right, so there you have it. We have successfully completed the unboxing and assembly of our Tazer Alloy. This model here is the Pro. The process for the Expert is very similar. If you have any questions or need any help along the way, don't hesitate to reach out. Our customer service team will be more than happy to help. Thanks for choosing Intense.